Number 1.
Hyman was last seen in Rochester, New York on October 30, 1981. After a drug overdose, she checked herself into the Rochester Psychiatric Center for an evaluation. She said she did not, in fact, need an evaluation, but she was afraid of a man and knew the hospital would have to hold her for 72 hours and she could be safe there. A man allegedly came looking for Hyman on the day she was scheduled to leave the hospital. On the day of her disappearance, Hyman left the hospital on a 4-hour pass, saying she had to go pay her rent. She told a nurse at the hospital she was afraid to come home because the man she was afraid of would be there. She has never been heard from again. She usually took the bus for transportation in 1981. Since her disappearance, she hasn't withdrawn any money from her bank account, but she had very little money in any case. Her only income was $250 a month in disability payments. The checks were stopped after her disappearance because she had failed to claim them. Authorities initially refused to take a missing persons report. Hyman's mother was not able to report her missing until November 25, nearly a month after her disappearance. Her case remains unsolved. At the time she went missing, Hyman was only months away from obtaining her PhD from the Rochester University School of Medicine.
Number 2.
Elaine Park, age 20 when she first went missing, now 21 alive, has been missing since January 28, 2017. She seems to have disappeared without a trace. The last time she was seen was leaving her on-again off-again boyfriend's house at 6 a.m. in Calabasas, California. She was seen on a surveillance camera in her boyfriend's driveway, though it was still dark outside, so it is hard to see the face of who is leaving. Plus, the video suddenly cuts off before she can be seen actually getting into her car. So according to her boyfriend, they had a date night. They retired around 1 a.m. and went to sleep. But according to her boyfriend, Elaine woke up at 4 a.m. shaking and singing and thought she wasn't having a panic attack. Now, singing is kind of weird. Yet he hasn't clarified on that, at least not publicly. Some people have suggested that maybe it was a manic episode, but the singing part still doesn't make much sense. Anyway, Elaine was upset over something, but wouldn't tell her boyfriend what. She said she was gonna leave, and her boyfriend told her not to go. Now, here's where there's some unaccounted for time. According to her boyfriend, she woke up at 4, yet she isn't seen leaving the property until 6. Did it really take her 2 hours to get dressed? Then, possibly more unaccounted for time. The neighborhood cameras show her leaving the gates at a time what would leave 69 minutes unaccounted for, from her leaving the house until her leaving the gates. It has been suggested that maybe the time on the tape had not been adjusted for daylight savings, so it was most likely actually 9 minutes from when she left her boyfriend's house to when she got to the gate, which seems much more reasonable. Her mother reported her missing when she wouldn't return any of her calls or texts. Police told her that since Elaine was an adult, she should wait an extra day to make a report, so that's what she did. Her mother also mentioned that Elaine suffered from bouts of depression due to her parents' divorce, and her mother even said on live television that she was sorry that she felt she didn't have the best relationship with her daughter and called out for her to come home if she's still out there. Her car was found 3 days after she was reported missing, parked along the ocean side of the road on PCH, just by the entrance to a Malibu mobile home neighborhood. Her doors were unlocked and her keys were still in the ignition. Her personal items were also found in the car, such as her money, makeup, laptop, and phone. It has been almost a year and there haven't been any solid tips. The surrounding area was searched using bloodhounds and a diving team, yet no remains or evidence have yet to surface. Now, onto my thoughts. I find it very possible that she committed suicide. Mental illness is complex. As someone who deals with mental health issues, I understand how she could appear fine one moment and be distraught the next. Originally, I was confused as to why she would choose to drive 20 minutes out to that spot in Malibu in the middle of the night and get into the cold ocean in the middle of the winter. I was wondering why she even went that direction. She was from La Crescenta, which is the total opposite direction of Malibu. Another thing, if she was set on going to Malibu to kill herself for whatever reason, why chose the ocean? In order to get to Malibu from that part of Calabasas, you have to take a canyon, unless you want to drive like 30 miles out of the way. And that canyon includes lots of steep cliffs, which many cars have tumbled over the side of and led people to their deaths. But then I got to thinking, maybe she didn't want a fiery death. Maybe drowning sounded more appealing to her. Her drowning herself in the ocean would also make sense as to why no trace of her has yet to be found. I really hate to see her case go cold. Someone must have seen something. There's always people driving down PCH in Malibu. Yet no viable leads have come forward. Police have not yet been able to rule out foul play due to lack of evidence and the fact that the way she left her possessions was mysterious, but the police have said that they firmly believe that it was not suicide. Park enjoys musical theater and dance. She had played in several minor roles on TV shows and movies. She had had some difficulties in her life. Her parents were divorced, she suffered from bouts of depression, she'd dropped out of Pierce College, and she'd been laid off from her restaurant job. However, her family doesn't believe she would have taken her own life or run away from home. Her case remains unsolved.
Number 3.
Wilson was last seen at her home in the 1600 block of 13th Avenue Southeast in Cedar Rapids, Iowa on April 12, 1981. Her boyfriend of 3 years, Colbert L. Billy Beats, stated she behaved normally that day but did not attend church as she usually did. Beats attended the midday services, then went to Wilson's residence in the afternoon. He and Wilson left within a few minutes of one another at 4 p.m. Beats went to his mother's house, and Wilson was supposed to get gas for her car and then go visit a friend she worked with at the Harnischfager Corporation plant. Wilson never went to see her friend, but Beats says he drove past her car, which was going in the opposite direction, about an hour after he left her house. She has never been heard from again. The next day, when he found out she hadn't showed up for work, Beats reported her missing. 2 days after Wilson's disappearance, Beats' brother found her white 1978 Ford Fairmont with the license plate number DOI 622 was found in the parking lot of a Kmart store in the 2700 block of 16th Avenue Southwest. There was no sign of Wilson at the scene. Wilson was born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama, and moved to Chicago, Illinois after graduating high school. She married and moved to Cedar Rapids in the late 1970s. She got divorced in 1978 and began dating Beats, her former husband's uncle. She had bought a car, furniture and a home the previous summer and is described as a level-headed and reliable individual who was making good money at her job. It is uncharacteristic of her to leave without warning. Beats moved into her home 5 months after she vanished but didn't pay the mortgage. He continued to live there until the house was foreclosed on in January 1982. Many members of his family have gotten into trouble with the law over the years, but none of them have been named as suspects in Wilson's disappearance. Her ex-husband is not believed to be involved in her case. Wilson is one of 5 siblings. 2 of her brothers died before her disappearance, the other 2, who were living in Atlanta, Georgia in 1981, traveled to Iowa to help in the search for her. Foul play is suspected in Wilson's case, but little evidence is available in her disappearance.
Number 4.
Melvin resided with his family near Vine Street and Paradise Street in Orrville, Ohio in 1928. He went to play with 4 neighborhood friends during the late afternoon hours of December 27, 1928. He was carrying a small red toy truck or wagon at the time of his disappearance. He had received the toy as a recent Christmas gift. His friends said they played in a vacant lot off of Chestnut Street near the railroad tracks. The boys told authorities that, sometime during the evening hours, Melvin announced it was late and said he had to walk home. He was approximately 1 block from his family's house at the time. Melvin never arrived and has not been heard from again, but the toy he had been playing with was found in his front yard. Melvin's mother, Zara, called him inside for dinner at approximately 4:30 p.m., and he did not arrive. She sent her older son to look for Melvin at neighbors' homes, but the search turned up nothing. When Melvin's father, Raymond, arrived home from work at 6 p.m., he and Zora began looking for their son in their neighborhood. The Horst summoned authorities by 7 p.m., and an extensive search was initiated by 8:30 p.m. that evening. Many of Orville's 4,500 residents assisted in the process, which was led by Raymond's brother, Roy, the village marshal. The search lasted weeks and covered about 100 square miles, including house-to-house searches in Melvin's neighborhood. No sign of the child was uncovered. Investigators originally thought that Melvin had been abducted for ransom by someone who mistook him for a neighbor boy he resembled. Melvin's family was working class, but the neighbor child's parents were considered wealthy. Authorities discarded the theory when no ransom demands were made. Melvin's disappearance made nationwide headlines, and the media followed his story closely at the time. He vanished during the Prohibition era, and Roy was a particularly zealous enforcer of liquor laws, which incited considerable enmity against him in Orville and the surrounding area. It was theorized that bootleggers kidnapped Melvin to get revenge on Roy, who had lived with Melvin's family until shortly before the child disappeared and was very fond of his nephew. A bootlegger, Elias Arnold, his children, William Arnold, Arthur Arnold, and Dorothy McHenry, and his son-in-law, Dorothy's husband Bascom McHenry, were arrested and charged with Melvin's abduction on January 2, 1929. Elias had spent much of 1928 in jail as a result of liquor arrests, as had several members of his family, and he reputedly bore a grudge against Roy Horst. The family lived around the corner from Melvin's family at the time. Charles Jr. Hanna, the 8-year-old son of Elias's brother-in-law, told investigators that he saw Melvin being lured into the Arnold home on the day he disappeared. The story was corroborated by a 9-year-old neighbor. The Arnolds maintained their innocence in Melvin's disappearance, and they had alibis for the time the child vanished, but Elias and Arthur were convicted and spent 3 months in jail before authorities learned that Jr. could not have seen what he claimed he had seen from where he said he had been standing at the time of the abduction. The men were found innocent of involvement in Melvin's case during a second trial shortly thereafter. Jr. subsequently accused his own father, Charles Hanna, and a neighbor, Earl Connell, in 1930. He stated that they had killed Melvin and then asked him to make up the story, accusing the Arnold family. Both men confessed that they murdered Melvin inside of a garage after he caught them drinking whiskey. Neither of the suspects admitted being the actual murderer, and it was later determined that their confessions were coerced by law enforcement officers. There have been no arrests in connection with Melvin's case since 1930. Some people believed that Melvin had been abducted and/or murdered, or that he was hit by a car and the driver panicked and concealed the evidence. Others thought that one of Roy Horst's enemies attempted to scare the marshal by instigating his nephew's disappearance. Investigators are still looking into the second theory. One possible suspect is Anthony Tony Long Laffitch, an organized crime figure from the Akron, Ohio area. A woman reported Laffitch had kidnapped Melvin to get back at Troy and that she cared for him for several days in an upstairs apartment off Market Street in Akron before Laffitch moved him elsewhere. Authorities hope to verify this account. Laffitch died in 1994. Melvin's parents moved to Florida after his disappearance and are now both deceased, as are his 2 brothers. His younger sister still lives in the area, however, and still hopes for answers in his disappearance. Authorities have stated that they never officially closed Melvin's case, but they doubted any new information would lead them to his whereabouts.
Number 5.
Alexis disappeared with his mother, Evelyn Hernandez. A photograph of her is with below this case summary. Evelyn's birthdate is February 23, 1978. She was 24 years old in May 2002. They were living together in the Crocker Amazon neighborhood of San Francisco at the time of their disappearances. Evelyn was heavily pregnant with a boy, about 1 week away from her due date, when she and her son vanished. She planned to name the baby Fernando. Evelyn was last heard from by her family on April 30 when she spoke on the phone to her boyfriend and 2 of her sisters, one of whom lives in the eastern San Francisco Bay Area of California and the other who lives in Virginia. She spoke with her California sister about a baby shower her sister had planned for her. Evelyn took Alexis to daycare on May 1 and also used an ATM that day. Evelyn and Alexis were never heard from again. Her boyfriend reported them missing 1 week later. She had limited English skills at the time she disappeared, and she did not own a car. She was originally from El Salvador. She had moved to the United States at the age of 14 to live with her mother. Most of her family lives in El Salvador. Evelyn and Alexis's passports were found inside their home. Evelyn's wallet was found a short time after her and her son's disappearance in a South San Francisco parking lot 2 blocks from the workplace of her unborn child's father. There was a disability check made out to Evelyn and $40 in cash inside the wallet. A canal near to the parking lot was searched, but nothing was located that pertained to Alexis and Evelyn's cases. Police originally thought Evelyn might have taken Alexis and left the area to have her baby in privacy, but by midsummer they suspected foul play in the disappearances, as nothing had been heard from them and they had taken no personal belongings with them. Their suspicions were confirmed in July when a badly decomposed pair of legs and a torso, clad in a maternity blouse, were located near the San Francisco Bay Bridge. DNA tests confirmed in September that the remains were Evelyn's. Alexis's body was not located. He has never been found. Neither was the rest of Evelyn's body, nor her fetus. Alexis's biological father was in the Navy when his son was born. He has never known Alexis and is not considered a suspect in his son's disappearance and Evelyn's murder. Evelyn's murder remains unsolved. The father of her unborn son, Herman Albert Aguilera, a 36-year-old married airline mechanic whom she was dating at the time of her disappearance, has been questioned and cooperated with police initially, but he has since hired a lawyer and stopped talking to investigators. He has not been ruled out as a suspect, but he is not being called a serious suspect either. Aguilera was reportedly unhappy when Evelyn became pregnant. He had not told her he was married until after she announced her pregnancy. Evelyn, however, seemed to want the baby and was looking forward to its birth. The parking lot where her wallet was found is nearby to a gas station used regularly by Aguilera. He claims he was at home with his wife at the time Evelyn disappeared. There has been some speculation that Evelyn's murder and Alexis's disappearance may be related to the Lacey Peterson case. She was 8 months pregnant when she disappeared from her Modesto, California home on Christmas Eve, 2002. Her corpse was found, in pieces, in the San Francisco Bay in May 2003. The fetus's remains were also found. Lacey's husband, Scott, was convicted of capital murder in the deaths of his wife and unborn son. Some tabloid newspapers have suggested that Scott was involved in Evelyn and Alexis's disappearances because of the similarities to Lacey's murder. They also suggested that Scott may be behind the disappearance of Kristen Smart, who attended California Polytechnic State University at the same time Scott and Lacey did. Police have investigated both claims and say there is no connection between the cases. Evelyn was a legal immigrant who was employed as a vocational nurse at the time of her disappearance. Her loved ones say she was a devoted parent. It is unknown where Alexis might be or who killed his mother. He attended the Buena Vista Elementary School in 2002, and his mother volunteered there. Foul play is suspected in his case due to the circumstances involved.
Number 6.
Veronica was last seen leaving her place of employment, the Super Value grocery store in Mendota, Illinois, at 1:07 a.m. September 20, 1990. She was supposed to the night shift for the first time in weeks. She'd taken time off work because she was recovering from an illness. She still felt sick and decided to leave work early and go home to sleep. She has never been heard from again. Veronica's blue Chevrolet Corsica was found parked in her garage at her home 4 blocks away at 7:30 a.m. The garage door was closed and there was no sign of her at the scene. At the time of her disappearance, she resided with her parents and younger brother in the 1200 block of Monroe Street. She was supposed to give her brother a ride to school that morning, and when he realized he was gone, he told their father, Paul, and drove to school in his own car. Paul was initially not concerned because he assumed Veronica had decided to have breakfast with Jeff Viverka, her boyfriend of 5 months. At 10:30 a.m., however, Viverka called and Paul realized they weren't together. He checked with his oldest daughter, Carolyn, who lived in a nearby town. Carolyn said her sister wasn't with her either. That afternoon, Viverka reported her missing. An extensive search of the area turned up no sign of Veronica. Dogs traced her scent from her family's garage to a nearby alley, then lost the trail. Police interviewed Viverka on September 23. He'd been injured in a prior motorcycle accident and had problems with his memory as a result, and he wasn't sure what had happened on the night of Veronica's disappearance. He said he thought she might have called him at 9:30 p.m. on September 19 and talked about going to a doctor the next day because she was pregnant. Viverka said it was possible he'd picked up Veronica that night, argued with her and pushed her, and that she got hurt real bad. Authorities didn't take his statements seriously, however, because of his neurological problems. Investigators do not believe Veronica left of her own accord, as she left behind all her clothing and her vehicle. She had no credit cards, and her bank balance was only $4 when she disappeared. Authorities theorize that, after parking her car at her home, Veronica got into another vehicle with someone she knew. A year after her disappearance, investigators searched Viverka's father's residence. Viverka now maintains his innocence in her case and hasn't faced any charges relating to it, and no evidence was located during the search. Veronica is described as a shy, retiring young woman. She was carrying less than $10 in cash on the night of her disappearance. Her work smock, purse and driver's license were found in her car, but her boyfriend's class ring and a video she'd rented were never recovered. Her case remains unsolved.
Number 7.
Troya was last seen at the Frontier restaurant in Albuquerque, New Mexico, during the late evening of September 30 or the early morning of October 1, 1995. She had gone to a bar with friends earlier, then left with Glenda Jean Jessire when they left to go to the restaurant. Witnesses reported Glenda and Troya had an argument. Glenda later told police she left Troya at the Frontier restaurant and left with her father, David Parker Ray, and that she and David went to the Elephant Butte Reservoir in southern New Mexico. Troya has never been heard from again. Her mother in Michigan reported her missing. In 1999, David, Jesse and 2 others were arrested and charged with kidnapping and sexually torturing 3 women. David was convicted of all charges and died in 2002, months after he was sentenced. Glenda pleaded guilty to 1 count of kidnapping. Authorities believe David was a serial killer who kidnapped, tortured and murdered up to 40 women, but no remains have been recovered. Troya may have been one of his victims. A photo of David is posted with this case summary. Troya is described as a trusting, naive young woman. It is uncharacteristic of her to be out of touch with her loved ones. Her case remains unsolved.